Hello, I'm Sheila Pro, the Love Doctor. Let's talk about making love better. And for this conversation, I've invited a very dear friend of mine and coach and colleague. I've been her mentor, and she is one of my coaches. And we decided that we wanted to, Triccia Ramos is her name. I don't want to keep that a secret. And her beautiful face is right in front of you if you're on our YouTube podcast, and you'll hear her wonderful voice in a moment if you're only on the audio. So we talked about what aspect of love did we want to share with you. And in our journey together, in our journey in our lives, and the journey as friends and colleagues, we've shared the extent to which we all struggle, no matter what stage of life we're in. We struggle with the various dark parts of ourselves, or what we call the shadow. We struggle with the dance that we're doing with being high performance and high achievers, and finding ways to also regroup and care for ourselves. So there are times that we, by virtue of trying to be all things to all people, or to rising to perhaps an occasion that stretches us sometimes beyond where we need or would be wise to stretch ourselves, we find ourselves caving in. We find our bodies and our spirits saying, please pay attention to me. Please take care of me. I need to regroup. I need to refresh. I need to renew. And so I was reflecting on one of my favorite psychologists. I think of Carl Jung as both a psychologist and a philosopher, one of the leaders in our whole field of spiritual psychology. And he was one of the preeminent leaders in the world in really delving deeply into what the shadow self is all about, what the dark side is about for all of us. And he said the following: owning our shadow is being willing to see it, to embrace it, and integrate it. He says incorporating all aspects of ourselves is what leads to self-actualization. So in our lives and our journey, we seek to actualize ourselves, meaning to reach our highest level of potential, to be willing to stretch in a bold and creative state of wonderment about what could be possible for us tomorrow that maybe I didn't think was possible today. So with that little introduction, I'd like to introduce you all to Triccia Ramos, coach par excellence, all about high performance. And for you to share with us, Triccia, what this topic means for you, and what you'd like to share about where you are in your life, and what it means to you to be keenly aware of how important it is to love yourself, to nourish yourself, to treasure yourself, to treat yourself as precious.
Well, Sheila, first of all, thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to and honored to be a guest on your podcast. And it's I love that we're jumping right into this topic of the shadow. And I always tell my clients that we teach the thing we need to learn the most in life. That in life, whatever we're faced with is the thing that actually is going to help us expand and ascend to that highest level potential that is inherent in each and every single one of us. And so, excuse me, when we talked about making love better, I thought, well, the thing that I teach people a lot that I'm also still learning has a lot to do with self-love. And that's such an important topic, especially, in the midst of the pandemic, when people were forced to just learn what being means. For months, we had to sit home, spend way more time with people we live with than we had been used to. And perhaps if we don't live with anyone, spend way more time with ourselves than we had been used to. And so, often you can go through life giving love and expecting love from another human being without really having full understanding or appreciation for the power of self love. And I consider last year as challenging as it was, and it certainly was the most challenging year for, all of us as a planet, on a psychological, spiritual, on that plane, in that conversation. I consider last year a gift because it gave people the space to actually delve in. That's what it did for me. It gave me the space to actually get to know what the shadow is, what perhaps, how perhaps my shadow shows up. And if left untreated, what it could potentially be preventing me from experiencing, which is really the fullness of life. And so, for as long as I can remember, I have always been somebody, even as a kid, I made people laugh. I would make people smile. I always felt other people's energy. And when there was something that wasn't light in the room, I always, as a little girl, I always somehow felt responsible for bringing light into the room. So I grew up, I danced a lot. I love dancing, I love music. I don't think I could really sing, and you know that because we've actually had some voice lessons together.
This is the thing. The point is we can all just be better at what we do. But
Yes. But I would sing and dance, along with my sister, so we could provide entertainment. I grew up in a regular, you could say, normal home, two parents, both there. And yet there were a lot of moments where there just wasn't that joy present. And so I felt at a very young age responsible to bring that. So that, what does it look like? Well, it looks like, even as a kid, not really needing anything. I was rewarded at a very, very early age not to need, that self reliance and self sufficiency was how you could be a good kid. And I had two younger brothers that I often, they were with me a lot. And, I always just um, saw myself as someone extending care and energy out. And really, as I matured and, I went to college, made friends, joined teams, organizations, started working, I always really equated the value of my experience, or really the value that I offer, based on how, what I could give out to others. Not realizing that I wasn't learning how to receive, how to ask for help, and that I actually had learned that showing vulnerability, or practicing surrender, was really, I mistakenly learned that those were signs of weakness.
it's a trap, isn't it? It sounds to me as if the message you were given, maybe just implicitly, was that you're not supposed to need anything. You're just supposed to give, give, give.
Yes. And so, I work with women and men, and coach women and men. And it really it's this thing that, especially high achievers, a lot of high performers share in common, this attachment to giving, or producing, or performing, and having that be what determines, one's worth. And so, fast forward to a few years ago, when I turned 40, I had a stroke. And it was really quite unexpected, because everybody knew me as like superwoman. I was in the best shape of my life. And, physically, yeah, when you looked at me, it looked like I was unstoppable. And I actually had this identity that I was unstoppable. And so in the months, we could even say years leading up to that, I was working round the clock, burning multiple candles at both ends. I had a demanding job. I worked for a retailer, Crate and Barrel. I had a big job with that organization. I was with them for 20 years. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Today I'm that, but back then I wasn't. And so I had side businesses.
Hmm.
I was a team Beachbody coach. I also taught group fitness classes, very physical. And I had, the year before, received my certification for holistic health coaching from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. So I also had clients I was coaching one-on-one with holistic health. And I had a boyfriend, and I had a full life, and people were like, how are you doing all these things? And I thought about when I was in college and I was pre-med and had 28 credits. I was the captain and choreographer of our dance team. I had 5 jobs,
Well, you
you
got
know.
really, really good at doing.
I was I was like the epitome of, you can do anything and I'm going to do it. And yeah, part of the implicit messaging I received as a young girl, as a young child, was that you got to do for you. You can't rely on anyone because you don't know who's going to let you down. And you don't want to rely on anyone and then feel trapped that you're not going to be able to get yourself out of any situation that you don't want to be in. So you just have to do everything for yourself. And so I thought, okay. And, I got super, super at that.
Well, you were building a lot of different muscles, weren't you? But when you're building a lot of muscles in one direction, it sounds to me like you lost sight of the importance of building muscles in other directions at the same time.
It was pure outward energy. And all along during those years, I was always in touch with spirituality. I read a lot, as you know, and I understood metaphysics. I understood psychology. I majored in psychology and philosophy in college. So I always had a curiosity for, our mindset, our performance, and I was a great student. So I really loved, the idea that if you apply yourself, if you apply your mind, and you follow up with discipline, you could do anything. And so I did. I was an expert at that. So then one day, completely unexpected, this stroke occurred, and I was not your typical stroke patient. I was just 40 at the time, and I, by the grace of God, was able to walk out of the hospital as if the event never occurred.
Was it?
Everything that I lost in the moment came
Mhm.
back, and that I was able to walk out of the hospital within 2 days on the second day, miraculously not needing any therapy.
Right. But it was a huge wake up call, wasn't it?
It was a huge wake up call. And this is the interesting thing about wake up calls. Wake up calls can either really wake you up so that you do something different, or they can wake up a part of you that you didn't know, you hadn't acknowledged was there. And for the years leading up to that, I never saw myself as anything less than unstoppable. I was a source of light, a source of joy. I didn't feel negative emotions. I was,
Oh, you felt them, Trisha. You just didn't allow yourself
oh,
to
I was so good at just suppressing them.
Yep.
They were there,
They were
but before they could even take form, they were pushed away and hidden somewhere.
because your body
And
knows everything.
exactly. And what that event, what the stroke woke me up to was the idea that I do have fears. I do have negative emotions that I've not allowed myself to feel. And that's the key, allowing,
Allow.
and I can't just keep overriding those things because eventually the body catches up. And that's what happened here. And what happened was, because I felt so detached from who I thought I was, without realizing it, Sheila, I shut down. I gave up the clients. I stopped teaching group fitness. I stopped trying to be an entrepreneur. I stopped doing all that. And I thought, let me just do the bare minimum, because I have to keep my energy. I have to save and preserve myself. So let me just do my job and let me just be happy with that. Why can't I just be happy with that? But you do that long enough. And in my case, it took 4 more years. You do it long enough where you compromise what it is that lights us up, the passion that we have within us. When we aren't living into our desires, it truly, truly disconnects our life force. And over the course of the next 4 years, that's what I felt happened. And by 2018, 4 years after I had the stroke, I was burnt out at my job. Super successful, super burnt out. My relationship that I was in, we were together 8 years. That broke up, because when you're burnt out, when you're depressed, guess what? It's not just going to stay in one area of your life. We are
Going to affect everything.
whole dynamic beings. And if we feel badly about one area of our lives, it's only a matter of time before that starts seeping in, and that those beliefs become part of your mindset.
So basically, what you're describing is the effect of shutting down from yourself and from others, pointing to we are designed to connect and interconnect, and it will eventually kill us in one of many ways when we do shut down. By the way, I'm working on my next book, which is The Magic of Alchemy, from Shutdown to Opening Up. And it's all about this phenomenon. It's the metaphor of the pandemic in terms of shutting down, being shut in, and then opening up. But it's really the dynamic of what happens when we shut down from ourselves and the people that we're connected with, which creates dis-ease.
Yes.
Because we are designed to be open and to be flourishing and to be and to have reciprocity, to have the free flow of give and receive. And if we are not in the habit of giving and receiving, the energy stops. It just flatlines. So that's what I'm hearing you began to experience.
Yes, yes. When we talk ourselves out of our desires, when we keep postponing what it is that we know in our hearts to be the ideal that we want to create, when we take away our ability to look forward to something, we are killing ourselves off. Because it's so important to stay connected to what it is that it's the simplest thing. What lights you up, and how can you do something every day that lights you up to keep you connected to that life, that life within you. And it was a slow burn, 4 years. And on that 4th year, the thing that really, believe it or not, one can go through so many challenges. And I call that year my year of divine dissatisfaction.
Beautiful.
because I truly believe today that everything that went on that year was designed divinely for me to be on the path I'm on today.
Well, it's often an issue of sometimes we have to know and physicalize what we don't want, what we are not, before we can get clear about what we do want and about who we are.
Because it is. And that's why I say embrace the uncertainty, embrace the challenges. One of my mentors calls it honoring the struggle, because in that moment where you're being pulled, you're being stretched, is an opportunity to either uh, go back to what you had before and just do sort of like a band-aid solution so that you can have what you had before, or actually get beyond yourself, let those old situations, your old identities go, so that you can then transcend that moment and be something greater. And so in 2018, I had a big flood at my house, and man, I love symbols. And water is all about rebirth, right?
Sure.
And it was a massive flood, caused by the neighbors upstairs. And I was here. I couldn't even see straight. I was so burnt out. I felt really disconnected from my boyfriend at the time. He wasn't even there when the flood happened. He was out of the country for 2 weeks on a business trip. And
Interesting.
then
Hmm.
this flood happened, and I was there by myself thinking, enough. Let's do it. Like rebirth. Let's go. Let's wash this all away, and let's allow. Now, that before 2018 ended, I made a decision to quit my job. January of 2019, I made a decision to move, and thank God I did. I left my condo in Jersey City, ended up selling that, rented a house up here in the Hudson Valley in Cornwall, New York. And that's eventually 2 months later is when you and I met.
That's right.
Um, and, my boyfriend and I ended up breaking up in the fall of 2018. So all of these ties were severed one by one by one. And I was with this job, this company for 20 years. And I knew that in order for me to really step into who I saw myself as being, I had to really just release. I had to release. I had to release. I had to let go. Um, and then that gave me almost like a blank slate. When I got up here in Cornwall, I looked at this house that I'm living in today, and I thought, this is where I'm going to create my life's work.
Yes, what you're describing is the cycle of what happens in the cycle of death and rebirth. Okay. So, with the work I do with couples, for instance, often people will come to me when they're in the moment of crisis. And what I've observed is that there's this gradual build up of all kinds of dysfunction, all
Mhm.
kinds of resentments, all kinds of anger, and people push it aside. They try to pretend it's not there, and they step over it until the buildup is so huge you can't step over it. So then we have a breakdown. We have a
Mhm.
breakdown either physically or a breakdown in the relationship. And until you have that actual breakdown, some people call it, hitting the wall. You can't really have a breakthrough, but that's the opportunity to break through to something entirely new. It's a rebirth of either the relationship or your own awareness, a new stage in your life. But this is the cycle. So to actually embrace that inevitability in your life, which says it's time for something new, it's time to birth yourself anew.
Yes. And the birthing yourself anew can't happen when there is an unwillingness to let the old identity go, to release, to let go, and to practice what I've learned a lot. What I've learned more about in the past couple of years is practicing compassion, forgiveness, and release. Because my entire life, I didn't know how much I judged myself. And one of the things, the gifts of doing this work with my clients is, as you know, everything that we are doing is also, we're all interconnected beings.
Of course,
So while it may feel like we're teaching someone something,
you're
it's
learning something too.
it's in the teaching of that that we are learning about ourselves. So it's such a, it's not, I love that you brought up Carl Jung, because he was the one that talked about synchronicity.
Yes.
And synchronicity being a set of events that are, I want to say, spiritually backed, right? As opposed to when we talk about them as just coincidences, they're just sort of chance. And Carl Jung says synchronicity, there is no chance. There is no such thing as chance. It's all divinely designed. And people who come into our lives are here to show us um, something about ourselves. And the same thing with situations and circumstances that present themselves to
Mhm.
us. They're here to show us something about ourselves. Oh, I have a knock on the door.
Knock on the
Let's
door.
pause.
I'm going to pause.
Okay.
Okay. We're back, having had a small pause with a knock at the door.
Yes. You never know who's going to knock on the
You
door.
never know who's going to knock at the door. Okay. Uh,
So, we began today talking about self-love, and the past couple of years have been such a gift to me, because it's in doing this work that I am learning so much about um, honoring me, honoring my worth, and that, in fact, so many of the issues or problems that we face and are created in the world stems from this piece that we seem to miss, looking for love or experiencing love, feeling, thinking, believing that it's something someone has to give us, when the road to self-actualization that you're speaking of absolutely requires learning how to accept and love oneself, despite everything we know about ourselves.
well, the whole idea of self love for many people is still a very difficult concept because a lot of people were raised with the idea that, oh, you're not supposed to love yourself, you're supposed to love others. It's kind of like you're not supposed to receive, you're only supposed to give. And a lot of people misunderstand what love is altogether, right?
Mhm.
And Eric Fromm, who wrote the wonderful book on the art of loving, he says love is an attitude.
Mhm.
Love is not about a relationship with one person. Love is an attitude. It's a state of being. It's a way of expressing your unique specialness.
Yes.
So love is basically, essentially, who we all are. Love is, as he says, an attitude. It's an attitude of let's just say creativity, to
Yes.
create who we're here to be, and to step into that every day in a perhaps a new way. So love is kind of the possibility of who we all are in the best sense of the word. So what you're describing is, how important it is to understand that love is not about need. It's about sharing. It's about an exchange. And love is not transactional. I'll give you this if you give me that. So love is not that either. Love is an attitude, and it's about your unique specialness. So tell us more about what you have begun to discover this past 2 years since you took that leap. You let go. The founder of the hospice movement was a very profound man. His name escapes me at the moment, but he said something very profound and very special. And this is dealing with the whole idea of death and dying, right? He said, at the end of the day, at the end of our days, what we realize that there's only two things in life that really matter:
Mhm.
love and letting go.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this quality, this capacity of letting go is huge, because letting go is the other side of what we call attachment, gripping and grasping and insisting, right? So letting go, as you said, you began to notice how important it was for you to literally release, to let go. 3 years ago, I became homeless. I had to let go of a lot of stuff. I learned how to be a Buddhist in terms of not having many of the things that I thought I had to have. I let go of my grand piano and all kinds of things I thought I had to have. And in that letting go, I've also let go of many other things that were much more important, like, you know, uh, children and my husband and my mother and things like that. But the letting go is that surrender into the bigger picture of life for all of us, reminding ourselves that what we insist on or think we have to have in order to be complete is a myth. It's a big lie.
Mhm.
And so, in that exchange with ourselves of experiencing the surrender and the leaning into life and letting go of everything we think we have to have or have to be or have to achieve or have to hold on to, we discover, oh, there's something else. There's a wonderful surprise out there. There's another possibility for me. And if I am able to let go, I'm opening the space for that to emerge in me and to come to me from others.
Yes. You said the word unique a couple of times, and the self-love is what you need to be able to give yourself to allow for your unique, authentic expression to come through. Otherwise, then it's a world of copycats, right? And then it's hard to feel true, deep connection with anybody when you aren't really feeling like you can be yourself. And we always talk about being seen, heard, and understood, which I always think is funny because how can someone understand you if you aren't willing to truly be seen? And
So, by the way, that's why I call my self love coaching course and program Intimacy.
yes,
Intimacy is an inside job. So, if I am not able to see into me, and if I don't see into me and accept me and embrace me, how in the world can I allow you to see into me?
right. And so by not giving ourselves the opportunity to truly be seen, then who knows what we are preventing from happening, how
Well, also,
differently things
it's
can unfold.
well, the question is, what kind of relationship are we really having? How authentic is it if we're not allowing ourselves to be ourselves?
Right. And so that's why this idea of self-love, which, is really just, the ultimate would be the divine love. I truly believe divine love, your relationship, your exchange with universe, your creator, whatever you want to call that recognition of that wholeness within, that divine love, and then the self love, right? So the self love is critical for relationships and creativity and connection with depth, right? Because you have to feel that you you're going to be okay regardless of what the external world, the world outside of you, might be showing you in the moment. The self love allows you to move through those undefined spaces intact.
So we're kind of talking very abstractly for a lot of people who may be listening and are having a hard time identifying with what the benefits are or what it feels like to be engaged in self-love, or what the benefits are or what it feels like to be willing to receive divine love. I mean, it sometimes seems a bit, just say, hard to get to wrap our brains around or our arms around. So, can you describe for us what what that is for you. In other words, what are the benefits for you? It's kind of like, a return on your investment. What are the benefits for you in engaging in this leap where you are willing to open yourself up to receive from the universe this divine love, and from yourself to delve into the inner realms of your own inner self and your own possibilities? What do you see as the benefit for you after having had that wake up call? And here we are 5 6 years after that. How would you describe the return on your investment in taking that leap?
For the last couple of years, I've had the time and the space to really reflect and expand my understanding that when I think it's up to me to control my life, my situation, the outcomes, that's never the case anyway. And something like the pandemic that, broke out last year in 2020 is huge, big proof that there's so much. We just don't know what is going to show up, whether it's something we experience that's unique to us or whether it's a shared experience that the whole world is going to have to move through. And so cultivating a relationship with, I call them these undefined spaces, the unknown, where potentiality exists, where without that dark space, one doesn't have to go deeper in your understanding. So, you know what it's like when things are all going well, things are going well, things are going well. And
Until they don't.
until they don't. And for some reason, why is it that until they don't, we as human beings don't recognize that perhaps we got to ask for help? Like, we know that when we have something like a flood or a fire or something, big happen, what is the exclamation that people say? Oh, God help me.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened to me when I suddenly became homeless. It wasn't part of my plan. That's another story which I wrote a book about. But all of a sudden here I am, and I don't know where I'm going to be living, and I've got all this stuff, some of which I'm giving away, throwing away, or whatever, put in storage, but I don't know where. So I asked for help. Actually, it came to me. 3 different families came
Mm-hmm.
up, stepped up and said, "You can live with us.
Mm-hmm.
Come live
Right.
with us," right? And in that receiving of that gift was a huge gift of reciprocity, which now has its own ripple effect, because each of these families are now part of my family, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
part of my extended family, and often I'll get a phone call or a text. "We miss you. Come on over. Come do your laundry and let's cook."
Mm-hmm.
Right, stuff like that. Or one of my girlfriends I stayed with for a few months, she and her husband have this one wonderful big house. "We miss you. Come, let's have a sleepover." Right.
Yeah.
And so the gifts of being able to accept our vulnerability, accept our fragile selves, and
Mm-hmm.
to say to others, I receive what you want to give.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Without shame, without embarrassment, which is a
Yes.
wonderful gift.
But for that to occur, there has to be a recognition of you, within you, for you, with you, right? There has to be beyond survival.
Yes. In other words, luckily for me, I had gotten to the point where I had been doing this inner work for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
when this unforeseen series of events occurred and I needed to act fast, um, I didn't take it personally,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't blame myself or anybody else, and I didn't harbor resentments. I
Yes.
just took action, and I didn't go to a place of fear, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to a place of shame and guilt and embarrassment either.
Right. Because what you're speaking of is taking ownership of your experience, and self love allows us to take ownership of our experience. It allows us to fully participate so that we are participating in creating our moment to moment. And, it's so easy to move through life, live day in, day out with no participation and just wait for the world to show you opportunities, take opportunities away. It's so easy to just be an observer. I always think about, like, that's kind of like living like the Walking Dead. How can I speak about it so clearly? Because I did it. I did it for those 4 years between the stroke and between when the year of the divine dissatisfaction, right? It's so easy to just wait and not really participate.
Well, the telltale sign of that is the way we talk to ourselves automatically all the time. Oh, I wonder what's going to be in my future. Well, you
Mhm.
can wonder all you like, but until you decide what you want to see in your future, until you begin to see that you are the creator and master of your own destiny, yes, you may have a pandemic. Yes, you may have a tsunami. Yes, you may have a flood. Yes, you may have a crazy roommate and that you have to escape from, whatever the case may be, right? But the point is that you are still the one who decides or not. Either you're going to live by design or default.
Right. And, having that intentionality, that is the self-love piece. That's taking enough time to actually cultivate this image, this vision of oneself. For me, I really saw myself as thriving with my coaching practice. I saw myself being of service to, when I began my practice, I worked only with women. So I saw myself being of service to all these women. I saw myself really creating networks and communities. I envisioned it, and when you're clear on, you know, what you're envisioning and why, I was very, very clear on why this was important for me, then when you can actually tap into that divine love, that divine support, I can be calm and let things unfold and enjoy the process. I don't have to try to control every nut and bolt, every piece of how it's all going to unfold. And, the past couple of years have really shown me that it's really fun when you can do that. It's so fun to release the unfoldment and to be grateful for it. So, with the self-love, it's key. Now, 2020, as I said earlier, it's a lot of time and a lot of space, and a lot of people woke up to, okay, am I on the right path? Is this what I want to be doing? What's the next level? I always hear this saying, new level, new devil. With the next level of growth, there's a next level of growth, a next level of growth. That came for me last year in the form of, okay, now that I'm no longer running away from negative emotions and I'm going to allow myself to feel them, let's try that on for size. Let's see what happens. So
So let's take a deep breath and pause here, because I don't want to step over the fact that you had been running away from negative emotions, which
mm,
is another way of saying I had been running away from my shadow.
yes,
I had
yes,
been running away from the dark underbelly that we all have. And
that
so
we all have.
can you distinguish what for you were those negative emotions? I mean, there are a lot of people I meet, by the way, say, I don't want to have any negative emotions. I don't want to be around negative energy. I'm only going to have positive, and don't talk about anything that's negative because I don't want to be around it. And I'm saying, do you want to, I mean, do you want life? Are you willing to live life?
Yeah.
Because life is about the whole spectrum.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
it's feeling all of those emotions,
it's
right?
being
So,
willing to be vulnerable to the full spectrum of life, because if you live life long enough, you might possibly experience loss and disappointment and
mhm,
death and physical pain and illness and financial difficulty, whatever the case may be. Are you saying to me that you want to pretend that doesn't exist? Or are you saying to me that you want to be able to embrace that so that you can ride the wave with equanimity, with grace, and with acceptance, and with ease, and with a peaceful acceptance. That's part of life. So what did you discover?
Well, I was always fascinated, for the past couple of years, since I became a coach, I started talking with a lot of other coaches. And then this idea of, I heard a few of them doing shadow work, and they were developing programs around the shadow. So I naturally became curious about it because it was a part of that particular conversation that I hadn't really allowed myself to go into before. So, I'm always, I love learning. And so this was for me the next level, right? Let's see what this is. And I love learning not just from a distance. I literally put myself through when I'm reading something, and I will do it. I will do the exercises. I will do the work. A lot of the work that I do with my clients, I've done that work, or I'm in the midst of doing it.
Mhm.
So for me, experiencing it is such a holding experience in terms um, of really understanding how this work affects people. So I started doing the shadow work. I began probably, I want to say, June of last year. And there's a lot that comes up with that, because a lot of what is in our shadow was formed and crafted while we were children. It's those first wounds,
Mhm.
the first times that we ever felt unsafe, perhaps unseen or unheard as children in our formative years, where that event, no matter how big or small, really what it did was create a lens with which we now understand the world. And the thing about our perceptions, we have very narrow perspectives because we only see what we see. And that's why.
Exactly. We don't know, do we?
Right. And you know that phenomenon where you it's a great phenomenon. Someone tells you, like, oh, I bought a red car, and you go out for a drive that day and you see every red car when you never paid attention to red cars before. And
Exactly.
and so it's the same thing with our lens. Our lens is just used to, that perspective that we have, the perception that we carry. They're just like a tiny, tiny collection of possibilities that are already out there. But because we carry this lens that we formed from very early on, a long, long, long time ago, over the years, we keep perpetuating those same things unless there's an intervention being one's inner desire to grow out of that, to get help, right? But most people are running in that small circle of perspective that they see from those lenses. And
And
so
as if to say, that's who I am, just, take it or leave it kind of thing.
that's who I am. That's just how I am.
And
Right.
and and when you're not willing to see that as just one stage of your development as a human being, and you're willing to forego the possibility of overriding that and expanding as a result of that, not just despite it, but in other words, to use that as a propellant and a motivator and a source of inspiration to move beyond it. If you remain in that place and say, that's just the way I am, you will forever be triggered by things
Mhm.
that come from that place, from that wound. And you will forever be reacting your way through life instead of empowering yourself to be proactive.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about trigger, the word trigger. So when shadows, when your shadow, and it takes time to really uncover what that might be for somebody. For me, I realized my shadow was showing up in the form of self sabotaging my physical health.
Yes, because
And
you didn't see where that even existed. You didn't acknowledge that you were vulnerable to that.
no, but a shadow left unresolved becomes something that will continue to show up in your life and stop you in your tracks, even when you have full momentum, things are going well, and then something inevitably happens that causes you to pause and stop, because now the ego is coming up on, oh, wait, whoa, that's way out of the realm of possibilities that we agreed on a long time ago. What are you doing? Well, let's in my case, let's activate your sympathetic nervous system, and let's take your parasympathetic nervous system offline.
Yeah.
Let's have this, let's create autoimmunity issues. Let's create hypertension. Let's create, all kinds of stuff to just like stop you in your tracks so that you can stay exactly where you are, because that's the part that we know.
Yeah.
So,
And by the way, another way of seeing the issue of the shadow is that we have blind spots. So
well, that's exactly,
these,
yeah.
these are different blind spots, right? So we have blind spots about our health, we have blind spots about our relationships, and until we're willing to uncover the blind spots, and very often the blind spots are uncovered for us by something dramatic that happens, like a crisis, like your stroke.
Right. And when it comes to relationships or partnerships, like the shadow you carry will bump up against your partner's shadow. I mean, not by chance, right? Synchronicity. People come into our lives to really, on a grander, in the grander, if you look at it bigger picture, to help us resolve, to give us choice to either resolve what that could be now, work that out now, or you have the case of, people leaving one relationship, I'm sure you see this in your work, different people involved, somebody gets a new boyfriend, different men or different women, but same situation,
Same situation,
right?
same pattern.
Same, or it could be jobs. Someone's unhappy in a job and they decide they're going to look for another job, and all is well. And after, that novelty wears off, it's the same exact situation that they had in previous jobs. And so your shadow is not anything you can run from, because the more you don't address it, the bigger it gets. And it actually keeps coming with you. It keeps coming with you. And the thing that I recognized when I began this work is I had become really bright. I had really felt so elevated. I formed my company, Enjoy Now LLC. I was really like, oh my God, I'm living the top of the world. I'm doing my life's work. I'm living my best life, and I'm making a difference to people. What happens is the brighter the light gets, the bigger the shadow,
Yes.
right? Like when you take an object and you really like shine a light on it, brighter, 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 the darker the shadow
That's true.
that it creates. So it was only a matter of time before my unresolved, you know,
Stuff.
issues
There's stuff. Right.
were here. And I was finding and feeling myself triggered, not really knowing why every little thing felt like it was knocking me off center. And then, what happens is, you know, I don't, this probably will be a different episode, but what happens is when you have a shadow that's triggered, it's triggering a past event, and for lack of another word, let's call them all the traumas that we experience, whether they're big T traumas or little T traumas. But when you experience a trigger, it puts you right back into that situation
Yes. It's part of
as if it's real.
well, it's part of our emotional memory, isn't it?
Yes. And the rational, that logic, that all goes away because now your nervous system has taken over.
That's right.
And so the trigger is really, a friend of mine said this so beautifully. When we're triggered by someone or we're triggering someone, it's really our nervous systems bumping up with each other. It's the mechanism with which like our nervous system is like experiencing each other. And we're sort of just like kind of trapped in that space. And unless you recognize that that's not a way to continue to exist, I gotta really find a way to shine a light on whatever that is that I've not been willing to look at, for the purpose of bringing that part of you back into the fold, into the wholeness of who you are, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm in the middle of doing that. I gave myself a 2-week self-imposed vacation the last week of February
Yeah.
to really be able to integrate like all these parts of me that I turned my back on. And it's in that bringing all those parts of me into wholeness that I can actually practice compassion with myself, forgiving myself, because that's really in the end who needs the forgiveness is the self, so that then there could be that letting go, that release, right? We began talking about self-actualization. Well, that happens when one feels the capacity to be whole.
So, and that capacity to become whole comes from letting go of judgment
Mm-hmm.
and embracing compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion for yourself, which then has its own ripple effect in terms of compassion for others.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that space of judgment, as I like to say often, love goes on vacation.
Oh yeah, we always say, this from our bold conscious leadership program. It's hard to stop doing something. So a lot of times to stop doing something, you got to replace it with another thought, idea, or behavior. And so we always say, start practicing more compassion. Because when you can practice more compassion, that is something that connects you to your heart. And the more connected you are to your heart, the less likelihood that you'll stay in that judging place. So the start the compassion, and don't worry about stopping the judgment, because by nature of starting, and extending that compassion, it will naturally connect you to your heart. And what we give ourselves, we inevitably give to others. Always. It's just the way it works. So the more compassion we give, the more we're going to be able to extend that same thing to others.
So, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of one of my clients whom I saw last night, who admitted to me when we first started to work together that he's had challenges in his relationships in life because he gets very defensive when
Mhm.
he feels that someone is criticizing him because he tries to be perfect all the time.
Mm.
So, in trying to be perfect all the time, and he spent the past 45 years trying to be perfect, doing his level best to be the best dad, the best uh, uh, administrator, the best husband, all of that. The extent to which he doesn't acknowledge his own capacity to be imperfect,
Mm.
the more he doesn't acknowledge that he may have a very high level of goal setting for himself, which is fine. He wants to be the best he can be, but unfortunately, he's thinking in terms of this perfection thing, right? So when somebody suggests that he might have fallen short of being perfect in anything, he gets defensive, he gets angry, he goes into a rage, and he becomes this person that he doesn't want to be, saying things he didn't mean to say, making all kinds of leaving all kinds of damage in his wake. And we talked about a conflict that happened between him and his partner, in which she needed him to be understanding and to listen to something that had upset her. And she wanted to understand why he hadn't gotten back to her. And she thought that he had seen her message but was ignoring her. So she claimed that, my iPhone says you read the message. And he immediately jumped to his own defense, becoming defensive. And his answer was, "Are you calling me a liar?" Now, instead of jumping to his defense, he could have had compassion for his partner, who said, "I needed you and you weren't there."
Mhm.
And he could have leaned into, with a desire to understand, a desire to be compassionate, a desire to hear what his beloved was saying. And he could have bypassed the being defensive, except he's not willing to accept his shadow.
Yes, that's
He's not willing to, so he's immediately jumping to his own defense, creating havoc.
and that's really it. We can't solve a problem that we don't name. When you're not willing to acknowledge, then by him not seeing that the shadow shows up in perfectionism and left unresolved, it's eventually going to, you know,
Yeah,
it's creating already problems in
well,
his.
exactly. I know those, as you know, by the time you get to be 45, you've established a lot of habits that just follow you everywhere you go in every area
Everywhere.
of your life, your professional life, your personal life, your social life, everything, right?
Everything. It's a
And you don't see,
whole gamut. It's
and
your
you don't,
life.
and you don't see the damage that it does, as you're walking through these arenas, right? Then all of a sudden everything starts to explode.
Because it is. The shadow is part of our mindset, whether or not we are aware of it. Now, it takes work, and I encourage anyone listening who, wants to do that work, is curious about that work, to find someone to work with, that really can help them make sense of it all. For me, my experience in doing the work began with a lot of reflection, which inevitably pulled up a lot of memories.
Hmm.
And memories are funny. We don't even know if they're accurate.
No, we don't.
But
We believe what that, what that recording has been looping around for what, maybe decades. So we
yes,
believe it, but
yes.
who knows? It may not be accurate at all.
Who knows, right? It's just like one person, it's your perception. And so having someone professional that can really help you, make sense of that, and to work with you on the integration of all of those memories. And then, you get to a point so now what? So now what? Right? Because also with doing shadow work, there has to be discernment. And discernment sounds like judgment, right? But it's not.
It's not. It's
It's not.
recognizing the difference between chocolate and vanilla.
Correct. It doesn't judge one is good or bad.
No, but they're different.
It right. So the judging is like, this is good, that's bad. That's not what discernment is. Discernment is knowing there are choices, and also being able to choose a path and feeling at peace, feeling whole about that choice, knowing that um, all of those paths lead to different possibilities. That's all.
So the blind spot that could show up, that's pointing the way to something you need to look at, might be a simple, innocuous exchange like, "So what do you want for dessert?" "Oh, I want some chocolate ice cream." "Oh, what do you want that for?"
Hmm.
Rather than, "Oh, okay, I don't like chocolate, but I see you do. I'm going to have strawberry," right? So judgment can creep in an insidious way when you don't even realize it, because that kind of question, "Well, why would you like chocolate? Comes from a belief that if you don't agree with me, if you don't like what I like, you're the enemy.
Correct.
And
Well,
right?
and that the person who said, "Oh, what?" Now, if it's I wouldn't be surprised if the person on the other side of the table is like, "What's wrong with my choice?" And now it's bumping up against something that's going to trigger them about them perhaps questioning their
And
choices.
there we have the quintessential fight.
Yes, fights that arise, and the two people don't even know.
What
It
just
doesn't even
happened?
matter.
Right? And then they're embarrassed to even reflect on the fight because did we just fight about ice cream? No, it was not ice cream. Ice cream was the vehicle.
And that's what happens, right? Like that is how insidious the shadow can be. Could be little things, big things. You can be making decisions that are life altering, choosing to move to another city because of a job, or um, deciding to stay in a relationship or not. These are huge life altering decisions that, unfortunately, guess what? Shadows tend to play a huge part in creating those situations.
Exactly. And in preventing you seeing clearly what the resolution might be as well.
Well,
Which
because
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. When our nervous systems are triggered, when we're triggered, immediate fog
oh
sets in.
God. Yes. Fog, blindness, veils, you know, barriers. Re- we cannot see clearly.
No.
So I often say, I'm all about clarity. All the work I do, all day, every day,
Hmm.
nights, weekends, whatever. It's
Hmm.
all about seeking to understand and seeking clarity
Hmm.
so that we, remove the fog,
Right.
we remove the judgment, and we add the compassion, and we add wonder, we add imagination, we add curiosity.
And those are all beautiful things to add, right? And focusing on all of that is enough to, I guess, enough to open someone's heart to, okay, if I were to practice a little bit more self-love for myself, because nothing happens overnight. If I were to give myself permission to demonstrate what self-love is, what could that look like? Going back to your example about your client, um, it made me think of things that I was doing a few weeks ago where I would schedule playtime for me.
Mhm,
Things that I would have enjoyed as a little girl.
mhm,
And I became very intentional with time that I would spend with my 5 and 7-year-old niece and nephew, where in their presence, I would really play with them. Not be here on my phone, not tuned out as they're doing what they're doing, and I'm just here watching them. No, no, no. Like,
you had the
what would it
intention
feel like to play?
all in engagement, which is what you must be involved with when you're playing. When you're playing, you have to be there. You have to
Yes,
be present. You cannot play unless you're present.
correct. And that, to go back to what we said earlier, when as a little girl, I really didn't feel like I could just need. When you can't need, how do you play? So I have vivid memories of not playing, watching other kids play,
Oh, wow.
and me not playing for
In-
whatever reason. I wasn't supposed to get my dress dirty. I wasn't supposed to sweat. I just had to
Wow.
be pretty.
And look at you now when you do your workouts, right?
And so, I realized as those memories came up for me last year, I thought I could use more playtime. I could use more playtime. And for me, the hikes in the woods, the really turning the music on to dance, all having the essence of play, just like allowing myself to be.
By the way, I'm thinking of another conversation I've had recently on loving your life in the fourth quarter. And one of the features of reminding yourself what's possible for you when you're in that fourth quarter of life, whether it's 60, 70, 80, whatever that fourth quarter is for you, is to ask yourself, when's the last time you danced?
Mm.
When's the last time you played? When's the last time you created something? When's the last time you sang a song? So to remind yourself that it's in these creative moments of enjoying the moment with a moment of play, singing a song, doing something creative, that we experience the fullness and wholeness of who we are.
Mm.
And so often we forget when we get to our fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh decade in life.
Yes.
So, life has been inviting you to discern what matters, to discern what balance is for you at this point in your life, to discern what you want to make of your life from this point going forward, learning from everything you brought up until this moment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a practice.
It is.
Just like you said, love is action, right? Love is
Well, love
love
is love is an attitude, but love is a verb.
attitude and it's how you behave.
It is how you be. It's not just a feeling. It's I mean, the feeling might be, I adore you. I have great affection for you. I have passion. I'm attracted. But love is the overarching attitude
Yes.
and intention of being who we are, and allowing ourselves to be who we're born to be.
I love I love uh one of the things I do at night right before I go to bed. One of the last words I say. I have a whole evening routine, but right before I close my eyes, or maybe just as I close my eyes, I say, I love you, Trisha. Good night.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm going to add that to my practice, Tricia. I do that in the morning, but I'm going to do that at night too. And I would suggest that any of you listening or watching this podcast episode, add that to your practice. Begin the day by looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, and you name yourself. And
Mhm.
before you go to bed at night, say, I love you, and name yourself. And that's a beautiful way to bring our conversation to at least a pause for now. And we'll have part two. It's a
For sure.
it's a rich conversation about how important it is for us to make love better for ourselves with ourselves, so that we can make love better for the other people and endeavors in our lives, so that we can experience the wholeness of allowing ourselves to be who we're born to be without letting fear stand in our way. And perhaps to eventually get to the point where you actually see fear as your angel who's daring you, goading you to be yourself.
Your divine dissatisfaction dance partner.
There you go. Beautiful. So, Tricia, before we say goodbye for now, would you let others know how they can find you, and what, just in a word again, what you're about and how people can find you?
Yes. So my name is Triccia Ramos. You can find me on all the major social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, under my name, Triccia Ramos, TRICCIA RAMOS. And the website, I have a business partner, Raju Panjwani, who you had on your podcast a few weeks ago. We have a website called livemasterminds.com where you can check us out. We coach entrepreneurs to really tap into unity consciousness and create businesses that are designed to raise the level of consciousness in this world. So check out livemasterminds.com. And let's see, we also have a podcast that we also just launched a couple of months ago, Bold Conscious Connections. You can check that out on any major podcast platform. And yeah, we
Beautiful.
have a YouTube channel too.
And so we both have our own podcast YouTube channels. I just established mine a couple weeks ago as well, and we are both on all those platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Audible, you name it. We're out there. So I am Sheila Pearl, the Love Doctor, and inviting you to make love better. So until next time, where we talk about making love better, add some of the ingredients that we've given you in this conversation to your life and to your loving of yourself. Bye for now.
Bye.